Good afternoon, beloved community. I am Melissa Miller, host of The Chosen Heroes. It's an honor and privilege to have you join me here today on this Sunday afternoon with our very special guest, Dr. LEN BER, who is the Global Medical Director of Targeted Justice. We have a great podcast in store for you today. So excited. So let's kick off the week in review for Targeted Justice News. Digital warriors, keep up the great work of spreading awareness on social media. Remember to include images and documents published on Targeted Justice website. Share Targeted Justice newsletter content. It only takes a few minutes each day to keep the flames of awareness fanning to the general public. Targeted Justice newsletter is over 20,000 subscribers and growing. And that is because of each and every one of you who is out there sharing content and fanning those flames of awareness. Very important community. I must make you aware that there is a scam out there. There is a fox in the hen house, okay? Someone has created a Facebook group titled Targeted Justice Support, which is not affiliated with Targeted Justice. This group is on Facebook using Targeted Justice content, videos, logos, and advertising legal services. They are asking for money to remove the TI from the the terrorist screening database. This is just nothing but a deception. They have also published an email address which is not affiliated or related to Targeted Justice. And that email is tjustice_team@proton.me. You see that they're mirroring the Proton email. That's not Targeted Justice. Targeted Justice email is tjustice2@proton.me. It never take anything that in terms of services or anything without going to Targeted Justice website and validating or taking the time to send an email and confirm. Do not take their scam artists everywhere. Okay. We have to be very aware that, of these scams. Ana Toledo will be having a live stream after this podcast to discuss in more detail about that scam that was discovered. Also, we need to be, I want to state that Targeted Justice has sent a FOIA request to the CIA 16 months ago. And what that stands for is the Freedom of Information Act. And it gives 20 days for, in this case, the CIA to provide documents by federal law. We're still waiting on that. We are trying to obtain information on human experimentation programs. And again, they have yet to respond. Another letter was sent to RFK Jr. this week, and separate from the civilian registry, that included slides and images showing findings of self-assembly technology within various tested dental anesthetics. Dr. Burr will go into more detail about this later on in the podcast. We recommend that you remove the Wi-Fi chip from your laptop and router, use Ethernet cables to connect, boot using Tor browser, Tails, and go through Proton VPN. This provides a more secure connection. Alternately, you can use Cube's operating system or go to www.puri.sm. That one is expensive, but it is secure. Electric fields are not scalar waves. Scalar waves produce an electromagnetic field. Please read the tab about scalar waves on Targeted Justice webpage. And then be sure to tune in to the scheduled targeted justice calls on X Spaces. Targeted Justice Veterans and Children with V2K is one that is a regular. Additional upcoming events can be found on targetedtievents.org. I'm excited to announce that Targeted Justice offered me a officer position with Targeted Justice. I have accepted, and I am the new Vice President of Social Engagement and Awareness and Community. I just love you so much. And that's what we're doing. We are getting out there through the Chosen Heroes, through Targeted Justice and the various platforms that they are on, and we are fanning those flames of truth for everyone to discover, right? So very excited about this venture. It is just, there's so much coming up. I could just feel it in the air. Also, I wanted to announce some upcoming guests on the Chosen Heroes. March 9th, Jill Amick, who is the Vice President of Government Outreach for Targeted Justice, will be on the podcast to discuss government outreach and upcoming special projects. March 16th, Faye Ellen returns. She has such wisdom about herbal remedies. She's going to teach us ways we can prepare herbal remedies at home. March 23rd, Martha Sheehan. She is going to discuss therapeutic benefits of aromatherapy. And she's just such a delight and has such great knowledge on all the different ways that you can leverage aromatherapy and essential oils. Excited to announce that March 30th, Dr. Anna Mihalcha, I hope I got that right, who is the author of the Transhuman series of books and Light Medicine. She's also an advisory board member for Targeted Justice. It will be a pre-recorded session between her and I, but she's going to discuss detox protocols for the targeted community. And also, I wanted to announce a new bi-weekly work session call. It's going to be a conference call with Jamie Rice. It is on the targeted individual combat training. And again, that's us strengthening ourselves and embracing our healing and with different techniques and retraining our minds to be that great firewall against what is being used against us with these technologies. If you are interested in that series, please email chosen_heroes@proton.me. And that series will kick off as a bi-weekly conference call on March 29th. I want to start out with a prayer and a short message, and then we'll get to our very special guest, Dr. LEN BER. God, we thank you for covering each and every one of our lives, and we are open to receiving everything that is meant for us. And who better knows what we deserve other than God, the all-seeing, all-knowing. I believe in your power to create miracles in our lives. God is just the justice of Hammer and will continue to reveal these covert deceptions and lies and programs. We trust that what we desire is already on its way to us, and we are grateful for everything that is about to unfold. It's like, I feel it so deep in my spirit. It's like, like a kid at Christmas or waiting at a birthday party for this big special gift. And that gift is God and his protection over our lives and the injustices that we have endured. We thank you, God, for your protection. And we thank you, God, for continuing day to day, giving us guidance and what we need to feed our souls and our minds to move forward through these times. Amen. So my message for today is we as a community must transition from victim to survivor and our hero of our story. I prepared a little slide here because there's so many frequencies going on, and frequencies of deception, right? Not just the ones that are being used against us in our body, right? But with what is spinning on with all of these revealings, we've got to get ourselves out of that, because the mass public is being introduced to things that is kind of crumbling their own, what they thought and what they believed, or it should be, right? So the victim is, again, the helplessness and the hopelessness and the blame and the blame shifting and shame and unworthiness and recklessness and self-pity and living in the past and stagnation. We need to shift out of those and move into survivor and being our own heroes, okay? Which is empowerment, hopeful, seeing the patterns, and ownership and resilience and self-care, self-love, self-acceptance, problem solving, being strategic and growth-oriented. We must choose empowerment. Targeted individuals can outsmart, outplay, and outlast, because we have been at the brunt of this covert operations for a long time. So just remember that. The biggest difference between victim and survivor is the thoughts and outlook he or she possesses. We must take the suffering and pain and turn it into action and purpose during this very critical timeline. God is throwing you a lifeline. Heed the call. All that has been known previously and accepted as the truth is giving way and crumbling. Targeted individuals must propel from these disintegrating structures of deception that the general public is now being introduced to. We must not relent, or we will be drawn into the chaos. Rise above it. Remember, targeted individuals have the uncommon mind. Each one of you holds the keys to personal liberation. We stand on God's word that he continues shining his beacon of light over what is hidden. Each day, no matter the result, keep pushing your personal limits, continue spreading awareness, try a different angle to attract others that are not in the know. Use words and language noted in official patents and published covert program literature. We are making a difference. We are. Keep going. This is a time the general public should be questioning everything, yet with the scare tactics and lies and deception, deceit, and the unspoken agenda, they're all running wild. All psyops with an intent attached. This is the era of the will of the people. We must read between the lines. We are greater in number than those who are oppressing us. Instead of being intellectual property of those who abuse power to manipulate civilians as if we're sacrificial pawns and cogs in the machine, we must take a stand against the crimes and atrocities being committed against our bodies and minds. The airwaves have been seized by dangerous EMFs, and all living, breathing life on this earth is impacted by this. The cognitive weapon and biodisruptive technology must become public awareness and knowledge. If we do not take a stand in action to spread awareness, humanity will fall. And God's perfection of design, which is human life, is lost in genetic modification and hybrid humanism. What we witness daily behind mainstream microphones do not have our backs. This is by PSYOP design to discredit us. So the truth is not unleashed. So what are we going to do? We must take a grassroots approach and seek independent journalists and holistic doctors to join in spreading the awareness. Meanwhile, the theatrical stage of mainstream actors and all of its production continues on. We will remain diligent, shining the truth with God and his army of light covering us. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, hi, Dr. LEN BER. We're so excited to have you here today to discuss Havana Syndrome and the anomalous health incidents.
Thank you, Melissa. First of all, congratulations on your tremendously successful podcast. Uh, it's just growing leaps and bounds, and you're finding your audience, you find your presence, and it's just exciting to watch and exciting for Target Justice, especially because you're now an officer of Target Justice. I want to congratulate you on this as well. It's an honor and privilege to be on the same team, fight side by side, and you're a shining example of somebody who started as a volunteer, then a podcaster, an officer. People find their place in the community, in the activism. Like I
Yes,
found my place in the medical leadership. You found we all can do it. If Melissa and I can do it, you
yes,
can do it. And
absolutely.
absolutely. So congratulations, Melissa. I
Thank you so
really,
much.
yeah, very exciting. So and I also, before we start, because it's mostly on Havana syndrome, I want to address this image behind me. It is relevant to one of the announcements that Melissa, you did, that we sent another um, letter to RFK Jr. in his capacity as Secretary of Department of Health and Human Services, drawing his attention to the undeclared self-assembly technology. This is
Mhm.
just one example
Wow.
of images that I produced myself with my uh, face contrast microscope. And it looks slightly different from what you used to seeing. For example, Anna Mihalch or Dr. Nixon, they mostly work with dark field microscopy, and so they confirm each other. They just look slightly different because of the way it illuminates the slide, the sample. So this is one of those chips, and we are knocking on the door of the FDA and saying every single dental anesthetic that we looked put under an optical microscope contains these so-called chips, and these chips are on the micro scale. So we know that the technology that it is assembled from is on the nanoscale. So if they don't appear in the sample immediately, you have to wait 12, 24 hours. Sometimes it assembles faster if you put it in the incubator at the body temperature. So we did a lot of research with my colleague Dr. Nixon, Dr. Anna Mihalcher, who's, by the way, is doing an outstanding job. Sorry, I'm jumping. On March 20th, there will be a medical global forensic webinar, and both yours truly and Anna Mihalcher will be speaking back to back about various technologies and reports. So circling back to this nanotechnology.
Right.
Uh, so this
It looks
particular,
like a computer circuit board.
yeah, it's like a mini chip. And in one of the studies, I even put side by side known
Mhm.
uh, engineered microchips on the microscope and these self-assembly chips, and they follow the same blueprint. So we think that this is a bio interface for the wireless body area network for creating brain cloud interface. But this is we need to start somewhere. There's so much information about this. These images nobody really has contested. I mean, I wrote to the FDA and wrote to the pharmaceutical manufacturers. It's just sweeping it under the rug. This time it is going to be different because we have somebody uh, who pays attention to this
Mhm.
so let's go to my presentation and we'll
I,
start.
I have one question. Do
Okay,
you
sure.
think, what about general anesthetics? Do you think that
Yeah,
these self assembling structures are in those as well?
I do think, and
I
I
would.
actually, yeah, we actually know that general anesthetics contain this. the reason that dental anesthetics might be even more loaded with it is the proximity to the brain. That's our hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes right. It just goes because it crosses that blood-brain barrier, right?
Correct. Especially when the parts cross and it assembles inside the brain, because it gets it's really, really hard to get it out of the tissue, and they get incorporated, intertwined with the neurons and the tissue and the astrocytes and glia. It almost, I think, and this is my personal hypothesis, this is speculation, I don't think you can detox from the chips that are already in the tissues. What I think will fight this technology is a different technology. So you find different, you send different nanobots or different chips that would seek out this technology and destroy it, and then self-destroy itself. But that's a speculation. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're doing it. So we're
That's
not
awesome.
we're not
That's exciting. It's like a science experiment gone bad. Kind of like these programs that we're subjected to.
Absolutely.
All right.
Let's get going with a podcast. So I want to start on a positive note. We have some good news. The contact has been made. Interestingly enough, on the very day that that RFK Jr. was sworn as the Secretary of Department of Health and Human Services, I received an email from the CDC asking for a conference call. Coincidence? I do not think so. And so I finally spoke to an officer at the CDC who is not a subject matter expert. She was just collecting the information, but they took our civilian registry report, and they will also be looking at what CDC is doing, collecting this information. And so maybe we can merge this project and we can make CDC to collect this information. But the main thing, the positive news, is the channel of communication has been open about the civilian diagnosed with Havana Syndrome and its anomalous health incidents. So let's celebrate this little victory. And I will keep you updated, of course, about that. Next slide, please. Unless you have any questions, Melissa, let's make it.
That was great. Yes.
All right. So, all right, I'll cut out a little bit. So we need to go to physicians. You mentioned holistic practitioners, but this is a mainstream neurology. This is not some obscure condition. And when you go to physician, most of the physicians want peer-reviewed literature. And another cause for celebration, the February 2025 issue of Advanced Medical Sciences, the international journal, has this article by yours truly helping a physician to understand Havana Syndrome and AHI. And it also contains a novel method of dealing with the AHI using percussive percussive guns. I can expand on that, but hopefully you go and read. It's available on ResearchGate and on Substack, and where we also have diagnostic guidance. So we don't just leave you alone, tell you go to your physician. No, please read the diagnostic guidance, and then with the help of the diagnostic guidance, have an intelligent conversation with your physician. So let's move forward.
And the massage guns, is that one on each side, and how it disrupts that?
Right. So the mechanism behind anomalous health incident is that the electromagnetic pulses of high power, very short electromagnetic pulses entrain your brain activity, and it starts oscillating at the frequency of those electromagnetic pulses, the exogenous electromagnetic pulses, and changing the frequency oscillation of the brain tissue. This process is called entrainment. It's also called coupling or synchronization. The mechanism of this synchronization is that it hits a certain specific receptors. They're gravity receptors, mechanoreceptors, proprioceptors, and it is the receptors affected most closely remind the set of receptors affected by percussive guns. So it actually creates a mechanical vibration, and that mechanical vibration travels to the brain, and there it competes with the effect of the exogenous electromagnetic pulses. And by using two of them, you create heterodyning. When you put two frequencies together, you create more frequencies. So which is simply um, either sum of two frequencies. So, for example, you have 30 and 40, you'll get 70. Or difference, 40 minus 30 is 10. So you will have 10, 30, 40, 70. That's heterodyning. You only applied 30 and 40, but you receive a whole spectrum, and it also multiplies and harmonizes over the spectrum. So that's all heterodyning. You might have heard this phenomenon, but by using two percussive massagers, you engage multiple frequencies, and multiple frequencies would compete with the exogenous electromagnetic pulses. And from my personal experience, I can tell you that it works up to a certain intensity of the electromagnetic pulses. If you have a grand AHI, very overpowering, it's just not going to help. But for the moderate to high in intensity, you can disrupt an ongoing attack using two percussive massagers. You have to be very careful because percussive massagers, especially using it on your neck, you have to sit down because you can be dizzy and losing balance from the attack, and then you also induce additional dizziness. I mean, you'll fall down, you'll crack your skull. So please only use it while sitting down. So it all described in that paper. So this is the only method of um, um, of medical intervention described in the literature thus far. There is no other literature that says, okay, this is how you shield, or this is how you interrupt it. This is the first article in the peer-reviewed literature that tells you how to deal with ongoing anomalous health incidents, neurostrikes. Basically, this is a much better term for it.
Yes.
Okay, so back to the guidance. We were going to talk about what Havana syndrome is, how doctors can diagnose it, how they can distinguish from other things, and I wanted to show you the sources. So this is the cover page of this September 2022 intelligence community expert panel assessment on Havana syndrome. That tells you that this condition, the combination of the four core characteristics of the AHI in this case, is distinctly unusual, is unreported elsewhere in the medical literature, and so far has not been associated with a specific neurological abnormality. So to those people who say, oh, the symptoms are just general, non-specific, perhaps, but the combination, the way they present themselves together is distinctly unique. So please use this statement. Please remember this statement and use it to your advantage. And it's found in this intelligence community expert panel assessment, which, by the way, was obtained via FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, by the one of the lawsuits that Mark Zaid was involved. So it's public. It's public. we can provide. If you go to our Substack, if you go to my Substack, you can't miss it. It's in every guidance.
And I also put it in the description for the podcast too.
Yeah.
The links are there for it as well, along with the peer review.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Let's move on. All right. So, what are these 4 characteristics of the anomalous health incidents and the Havana syndrome? The 4 things on the top are those 4 characteristics. The first one is the acute onset of audio vestibular sensory phenomena, such as sound and vibrating pressure. So these 2 things occur together and acutely. So literally, it just comes out of nowhere, or it can also ramp up within like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. That's very acute. That's very fast. And one of the symptoms is very distinct, is very specific. It's called buffeting. So this sensation of vibrating pressure to the head, teeth, torso, and the body. And it can be very uncomfortable. People start screaming and having, really, it's inescapable, intolerable pressure pain that is people just don't have a reference point to compare it with. Once again, if you ever put a massage gun to your head and vibrate it and then multiply it by 10, that's the kind of pain you we're talking about. But it doesn't even come close, because buffeting through electromagnetic pulses is just much more severe subjectively. And as someone who's experiencing it on a daily basis, I can tell you that this is no picnic. So this is number 1. So sound.
And is V2K a subset of the audio vestibular sensory phenomenon?
Well, it falls on definition because it's sound. It's a sensory auditory effect. So it falls under that definition. But what in connection with the neurostrike, you need to describe what kind of sound you experiencing as your attack begins. And for example, in my case, it's a very high pitch electronic buzz. It sounds like tinnitus, but it's really not. So that's in my case. People report screeching noise, like metallic voice, metallic sound. It's whatever you experience. Mm-hmm. You just present this symptoms. So sound and vibrating pressure, buffeting. And buffeting is very unique. And then at the same time, and this is what makes it really unique, not only the sound and vibrating pressure, you have other simultaneously occurring signs and symptoms, such as vertigo, loss of balance, ear pain, agitation, and cognitive meltdown. If you ever seen people on TV just losing, like Senator McConnell, if you've seen him completely just staring into in the space in front of him, and he's standing and trying to speak, but he can't. That's exactly what happens during a directed energy attack. These pulses entrain your brain, and it physically becomes painful to think. If you can imagine yourself, if you're trying to think and you can't because it is painful, that's the cognitive meltdown during the neurostrike. Mm-hmm. Very unusual, not described anywhere else. And the third characteristic is that these all the symptoms have a strong sense of locality or directionality. In terms of pain, if it's a localized pain, for example, mostly my in the temporal lobe, it's mostly on my left, so it is easy to imagine that the energy is coming from this direction. But also the sound, you always know which direction it's coming from. Just analyze and just be self-aware when it's going on. Okay, can I tell which direction the sound is coming from? And you can always tell. So this is another characteristic: locality and directionality. And the fourth characteristic is really not that important, because we already said that it's unique and not seen anywhere else. So the fourth is kind of just a backup, that all these things, 1, 2, and 3, occur in the absence of known environmental or medical conditions that have caused the reported signs and symptoms. And we already said the combination of the signs and symptoms have not been occurring with any neurological or environmental factor outside of being exposed to electromagnetic pulses. Any question, Melissa?
Well, I mean, this really is spot on to a lot of what I've experienced. For me, it either is the right or the left, but mainly the left, and I'll feel the hit, then the high pitching and the buzzing and the vibration in the ear, and then all of a sudden I will feel just like a slow burn come over my whole head, and then the fog, the brain fog just kind of sets in, and that's when I go into trying to divert my mind elsewhere, but it definitely, all of this makes complete sense. And what I've experienced too, not to your extent, because I know it's very debilitating. But it's no fun and no picnic for sure.
Yeah. But you see how this intelligence community report and the preceding National Academy of Sciences report also contains this kind of information. They put it into categories, and now we have these 4 things, and it helps us to classify our own experiential subjective complaints and put them in a specific box, and it just organizing the train of thought. Let's go to the next slide, because this is exactly what I want to tell you. People who, if you think you have Havana Syndrome based on this description, you experience an anomalous health incident, your next stop will be a physician's office. And I summarize here the do's and the don'ts. Remember, the symptoms and signs are incredibly diverse, and you might have some very unique, but these 4 core characteristics will allow you to put them into the boxes. Write it down. Don't rely on your memory, because in the moment when you are reporting your complaints, you might be cognitively attacked, and you will not deliver them the way you want it. So write it down, put it in the boxes. It describe what you experience, not your don't provide your conclusory speculations. For example, and we played this game, the role play game on X Space, and a person said, "Well, what are your complaints?" And he said, "Well, I feel laser attacking my chest." No, that's not what you feel. This is your speculation. It's a conclusory and speculative. So don't describe that. Describe what you actually experience. Describe how these symptoms occur, how they're connected. Do they occur all at the same time? The first one occurs, then the second follows. Describe that with specificity, and how long they last, and what happens after, and what provokes it, things like that. So really pay attention to the presentation of your signs and symptoms, of your complaints, of your experiential complaints. It's very important. And don't start with speculation. Remember that your primary care physician, if that's the first doctor you go to, is not a directed energy expert. And the really don't is do not ask a physician for a specific diagnosis. This is just not a good opening. It will never, no matter how diligent your physician is, you don't ask for a specific diagnosis. What you can ask is, these are my complaints, and I think that this might be uh, something related to electromagnetic pulse energy exposure. So, doctor, please include this into your differentiation, because this is how diagnosis is made. What fits and what doesn't fit. They have to create a menu of all the things that they have to differentiate it from, and just want to make sure that the um, effects of electromagnetic pulse energy is on that list. The doctor might not know what it is, but like, please differentiate it from. And when the doctor tells you your diagnosis, you're in your right to ask, why is it this one and not this diagnosis? And he might say, well, I didn't give you an effective electromagnetic pulse energy diagnosis because I don't know anything about it. Well, that's not an excuse. So that changes the conversation, and that's what we need to do. Come with solid knowledge. You need to know more about your condition than the doctor. It's the only way this is going to work, unless you're going to an expert like a Professor Hoffer, who knows this subject inside and out.
So
Yeah,
the diagnosis that would be the goal related to this is the brain injury non-specific or
no,
specific, non-specified or specified, or
yeah,
would it be the auto um, vestibular dysfunction? What would be acceptable in terms of
right.
being under that AHI or Havana syndrome?
Okay. I actually have a slide specifically answering this question. So let's roll over. Let's go to the next one, and we will get to that slide, and I will answer your question.
So definitely one thing, definitely be, as a you don't go in and say, I'm a targeted individual, I'm hearing voices, those type of things. It's more about going into specific symptoms of the vibrating pressure, the hearing, sounds, and on those lines. And because it
Yeah.
can tip that scale of very quickly if we go in with the wrong words per se, right?
Yes. First impression matters. If you start with, I'm a victim of directed energy weapons from space, and
Mm.
um, I'm getting stalked, and these are not medical things. Your doctor is expecting you to present your complaints. What is it that's bothering you? And if you say it's the Space Force electromagnetic pulse weapons, he will say, well, I don't know anything about it. But if you say, I feel this, then I feel this, it's simultaneously, this is what's happening. um so you present all this, and present honestly. I mean, in my case, as far as the voices, I do have V2K, and I with Dr. Hoffer, he put it uh, um, in the input form, and he said, of course you hear voices. It's microwave hearing effect, but that's an exception, because Dr. Hoffer knows that this is one of the effects. It's just not something that you should go and share with a physician who is not aware. I mean, that will derail your entire
Yeah.
conversation. And
Yeah.
it's a fine line. I mean, I'm not really teaching you what to say. I'm teaching you to present your own complaints in the most favorable way, so the effects of electromagnetic pulse energy will be on the list of things to differentiate from. That's really the goal of the diagnostic guidance. So I'm not telling you what to say. I'm telling you, present your complaints in a rational, in a reasonable manner, in line with your physician's understanding. You have somebody like Dr. Hoffer, yeah, you can say I have V2K, and he will just continue without blinking. But if go to your local physician,
Yeah.
and he will send you to psychiatrist, which is you have to exclude that. You really do. But it unfortunately depends on the level of education of that particular physician. So you know it better than me. This is the reality of the world that we live in.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So if you went to a physician, to let's say your primary care physician, and then what's next? What do you do next? So a lot of your complaints, if they're just classical Havana Syndrome AHI, would be on the vestibular side, the balanced issues. So to this day, the very first U.S. doctor who examined 25 victims of uh, Havana Syndrome AHI on U.S. soil was Dr. Hoffer at the University of Miami. And he's he has he had a group of doctors. They're all listed on the front page. So the reason I included this image is so this is the paper. This is the front of the paper. It will look like this. If you don't see this in the front of the paper, you have a wrong paper. So 2018, Dr. Hoffer examined those 25 still undisputed victims. The 25 people that he diagnosed are still undisputed by CIA, by NSA, but by anybody. There's just no way it would be psychogenic, psychosomatic, or environmental. So in the as a vestibular doctors, otoneurologists, sometimes they're called neurootologists, sometimes they're called dizziness docs. What he has in his arsenal is a panel of vestibular tests. And when he did this in this group of patients, he did these three tests, which I will detail on the next slide. And the 2 out of 3 tests in 100 patients, and all 25 patients, were significantly abnormal. So let's go into this specific tests.
Okay.
Next slide. All right. These are the balance tests that are decisive in the diagnosis. First is the subjective visual vertical, SVV. So you sit in the chair in the dark, and they tilt your chair just slightly, and they show you a vertical line on the screen or on the goggles, and you have to correct it and make it vertical. And even though it's called subjective, it is objective to the person who is administering the test. So the criticism sometimes say, oh, it's a subjective test. How can you rely on it? No, it's called subjective because it's subjective to the person taking the test, and it's subjective to the person administering the test. Then the 2 other tests that were significantly changed is ocular cervical, they need to be changed. CVEMP, that would be cervical vestibular evoked myogenic potential, and OVMP would be ocular vestibular evoked myogenic potential. So during this test, you lie on your back, they or like semi recline position, and they put sensors on this specific a muscle on your neck or muscles just under your eye. And this is a reflex that is impossible to fake because it's actually on the same side. So they play standardized noise or flush water in the ear canal, and if your vestibular apparatus works normally, you will have a distinct reaction. You will have a contraction of your muscles just under your eye and on this clavidio-sternal muscle. And that's how test you have. If you have a solid response, appropriate response, then you have a functional vestibular system. And when it is abnormal, when this reflex is suppressed, and sometimes it's suppressed 100%, so you don't get any reaction, something is wrong with the vestibular test or the nerves, neurons, or maybe something is wrong with the muscle. But when you get both ocular and cervical at the same time, I mean the overlapping part is your vestibular organ, the little saccule and utricle, and this is what they measure. These reflexes, and when these tests are significantly abnormal, and by significantly abnormal, I mean 2 statistical deviations or more, 2 out of 3 tests with the symptoms that you present, and the vestibular tests, 2 out of 3 significantly abnormal, you have a diagnosis that you experience AHI of the Havana Syndrome. Now, your questions, Melissa.
Yes, I've had some of the vestibular tests done, and it was abnormal, more so on one side than the other. Obviously, the one that I get hit more. So I think I haven't had all 3, but what I need to do is find the best doctor for this to continue, and then get with pursuing the correct diagnosis. But now, thanks to you, I'm educated on how to word and describe these symptoms. I noticed that in certain areas of my home, it's a stronger force. Like kitchen has always been a very strong one, or where I do spend the most of my time, which is at my computer, and then of course bedroom. But the kitchen seems to be, I can get so many different, more intensified, but it is closest to my smart meter too.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be a good idea to say that, I'm concerned that it could be EMFs, maybe emitting from smart meter. I notice it more in my kitchen, and
that would be a speculation, Melissa.
okay,
I think that right. The energy from the smart meter and the energy from, let's say, Wi-Fi, it's not the same energy that would produce anomalous health incidents. This is what people don't understand, and a lot of physicians have this resistance because they can't grasp that this is not environmental. This is intentional. This kind of energy, and you have to have super short pulses, like milliseconds, nanoseconds, and a very high power. It's not used in in your environment. You can't just walk by the Best Buy and catch this. It is intentional, and it is directed at your brain. So if you can educate your physician on that concept, which is, all the literature is what tells you that this is what's happening, and it's not like electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which is a real thing, but it is from your normal environment, like being, in the Wi-Fi. But the Wi-Fi is a continuous signal. We have a high power, short electromagnetic pulses, and when you talk about frequency, it's also we should understand that the carrier frequency is different from the frequency of modulation. So when, let's say, frequency X frequency, kilohertz per second, and then the pulses create their own frequency. So this frequency frequency of the pulses can be different from the frequency of the carrier wave. So it's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but this is the essence of how these electromagnetic pulses are different from your typical electromagnetic environment. You have to produce this highly electromagnetic pulses. And since we're talking about high energy short electromagnetic pulses, this technology that's behind me, people are trying to present these chips as if they are the cause of Havana syndrome. I don't think they are, because these chips cannot produce those high energy pulses. It just, they're so tiny that it's impossible to produce these high power electromagnetic pulses. By high power, I mean gigawatts. And gigawatts is let's say your microwave is 1,000 watts, but it's a continuous wave. In the pulse electromagnetic frequency, the power of a single pulse is in a gigawatt, so it's a million of watts. That is a different kind of animal, the different kind of energy.
Right. Thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is the slide that I promised you. What conclusion, what diagnosis could be made based on the balance test as described in Harvard 2018? You know, the paper with the paper with the graphics. So, and this is based on my case, and this is based on diagnosis of other people who are in the civilian registry. The name of the paper by Dr. Hoffer is acquired. It's called Acute Findings in Acquired Neurosensory Dysfunction. So this is what, in the absence of the correct term, this is what Dr. Hoffer and colleagues called it: acquired neurosensory dysfunction. And then further in the diagnosis, he mentions that this is the type of damage that is seen in patients with directed energy exposure. And by that, he means a specific group of people, the 25 diplomats and spies who were medevaced from Cuba. Those 25 is a homogeneous cohort and is known as the Havana cohort. So, because Dr. Hoffer is an otoneurologist, he keeps his diagnosis narrow. Just vestibular damage. And vestibular damage in the pattern that we've seen in the Havana cohort. But it's a part of a larger diagnosis, because vestibular damage is already brain damage. Vestibular organs are inside the brain. So it is brain damage. And in brain damage, you see other symptoms. For example, impaired cognition. I have come clean. I'm on disability due to Havana syndrome, and I have a premorbid dementia due to Havana syndrome. That's my official diagnosis from doing a neuropsychological evaluation, which is one of the methods we'll be talking about it. So using vestibular tests, you can differentiate these AHI neurostrike attacks from anything else, and then all the additional tests, they just will increase the confidence of your diagnosis. But this vestibular dysfunction is a part of a larger diagnosis, which is the non-kinetic brain injury. And the challenge here is that neurologists specializing in traumatic brain injury are tone deaf. They just never heard of any kind of brain damage outside of concussion, and it confuses a lot of people. Basically, all the literature, all the magazines and journal, they say, okay, these diplomats have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, but there is no trauma in the mechanical sense. So concussion would be a mechanical trauma. You hit the concrete, or something hits your head, or a blast of air hits your head, and this is what you have to have: a mechanical contact. In the non-kinetic, so it's a kinetic contact. In the non-kinetic brain injury, nothing is moving except for the energy. And the energy, as it goes through the brain, damages the structure and produces these symptoms and findings. So how do we code this? How do we diagnose it? And diagnosis is extremely important, especially if we want to track it properly. So currently, there's no code for non-kinetic brain injury. It simply doesn't exist. But for now, what we can use is the code S06, which is brain injury other. And then you can specify other due to exposure to directed pulse electromagnetic energy. So this is the structure of your diagnosis. You start with the vestibular system, you expand it to the brain, and then you code it properly. Did that answer your question, Melissa?
Yes, yes. This is great. Very, very helpful because I plan on pursuing this and
I encourage you. And if you have any questions, I actually when patients request and they want to they want me to invite me to their meeting with doctors. It's been done. I've done it. I spoke to doctors. I have another one scheduled just next week. They invite me to their telehealth appointment, and I become part of the conversation. I'm not your physician, but I can answer all these questions if the doctor is open to learning. And my communication with physician usually is successful unless the doctor is a complete a-hole. I'm sorry. they are
right. So, I mean,
there's
these
still that
physicians.
doctor that we can know for sure.
So these physicians, are they typically on the neurologist spectrum or just general practitioner? Because I personally would pursue the neurologist route.
Well, it depends on several factors. First of all, you need to keep your primary care physician in the loop because it affects other organs. And then, depending on insurance, sometimes you can go to a specialist directly, sometimes you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, like me personally, I kept it very much in the loop. I made all my appointments with the specialist, with the expert. I sought them out, but I always kept my primary care physician in the loop, and he learned this this sort of novel concept to him, and now he's well aware. He's in support of my disability. We're all on the same page. So I strongly recommend to create the alliance around you. So all the doctors communicate. They're on the same page. They're exposed to the same information. Conceptually, framework wise, it is really important to understand that this is a form of brain injury, and it's non-kinetic, so it's a novel type of brain injury.
Awesome.
Let's see what else I put. Okay, the vestibular test, the balance test are not the only ones that would go into building your diagnosis. The vestibular test might be decisive, but there are other ones that would increase the confidence of your diagnosis because there's similarities between traumatic brain injury and neurostrike. The oculomotor test, when like a simple exam, like follow my pen, and you can see how convergence is abnormal in both concussion and in the non-kinetic brain injury, and also the a smooth pursuit. When you follow a pointer and pupils move in a specific way. And so this, if it's done via examination, that's like a simple check. You can also use a chair test for that. You can use goggles. You can use video anestography, which is basically goggles, and it's a standardized test. And there's a light. You just follow light within the goggles. And there's also a computerized test, which can distinguish between um, concussion type damage and the non-kinetic damage with a 91% accuracy. And this is it's a follow-up paper to Hoffer, Kerry Balaban from University of Pennsylvania, was a part of the first study, and he was a leading author of this study. And it's called Distinctive Convergence Eye Movement in an Acquired Neurosensory Dysfunction. We already have the language built in. A lot of people ask, are there any blood markers? There are, but they're time sensitive. Those are markers of neural destruction and the damage to the blood-brain barrier. It's called neurofilament light chain protein, glial fibrillary acidic protein, and especially this new test, ubiquitin C fermented hydrolase, L1. So I know for a fact that the Defense Health Agency is using automated kit that detected UCH1. So if somebody says, I think I have had an anomalous health incident, they can take this automated test and processes it, and it can shows that UCH1 is abnormal. It's also available. All these tests are available at your regular Quest diagnosis. It's just important how early you can do this test, following your attacks. And then it becomes even more cumbersome when you have like a daily attacks, because they layer. The effect is layered, and some of these tests can be elevated in like major neurocognitive disorder like dementia and Alzheimer's, but not to the level that it spikes after a non-kinetic neurostrike. But you have to catch that. You have to catch it within 24, 48 hours. And then it goes back to normal or just above normal. And it also depends on the frequency of your attacks. There's also another blood biomarker that I didn't include here, and it's the glutathione. Barry Towers talks about this biomarker. Glutathione is a non-specific um, marker for oxidative stress, and oxidative stress would be increased in a bunch of inflammatory disorders. So it is helpful. It's just not decisive. It's non-specific. What I want to mention is the neuroimaging methods. Neuroimaging methods are important in AHIs, but once again, it's not decisive. It's just a method that supports the confidence of your diagnosis. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, specifically DTI, diffusion tensor imaging. There's a study that shows that there's statistically significant changes between the affected group and the control group. Then that was in 2019, and then NIH was trying to replicate the study, and it failed. And I will explain on the next slide why it failed. And then there's another method of neuroimaging which I highly recommend if you have access to it. It's called QEEG, qualitative electroencephalogram, with method is SW Loretta. So this is the kind of, if you see this little brain with little dark blue images, those are broken connection. A neurostrike, or AHI, is in its nature is a neurocognitive disruptor. So the connection between neural nodes are much slower than in the normally functioning brain. In normally functioning brain, the healthy brain, you don't see this broken connection. This is the slowest, this delta connection, just lowest frequency between like 0.1 and 4 hertz per minute. So extremely slow. In a normal human adult, you would only see it in deep sleep or in hypnosis. And this amount of this dark blue connection line represents a broken, slow delta connection, and it's just not normal. It is because brain is degrading and the connectivity is degrading, and this is a direct method to show neurocognitive disruption in AHI patients. And finally, neuropsychological tests for establishing a degree of cognitive impairment and a specific pattern of cognitive impairment. And this pattern is different from a typical concussion pattern, just like the oculomotor abnormalities are distinct from those abnormalities in concussion. It's because it's the nature of the damage is different. You have blunt trauma in concussion, but in non-kinetic injury, you have sort of this from inside out. It degrades brain from the inside out, and the character of degradation is different, and therefore very different level of different presentation and different findings. Different mechanism, different presentation, different mechanism, different findings. And it's still an area of research, but it is definitely there. The Balaban paper proves it, and the QEG proves it. Any questions?
I think in my personal case, like the neurologist that I've gone to for many years, wasn't some of these tests I asked for, and like the fMRI and the QEEG, the SW Loretta, wasn't something that he could facilitate. It would have to been on at an external imaging, but not receptive so much to the referral. So maybe again, it was just in the wording and maybe presenting that information, that peer review, for him to review, to go through together, and to rule out the directed neurostrike, the directed pulsed energy. So this is very helpful. I could see where I could have engaged a little bit differently, but I was still trying to be very selective in my words and descriptions.
Sure. But you do make a very important point, that the tests alone don't make a diagnosis. The physician assessment of your complaints plus the additional testing, that's how you get a diagnosis. Not just by doing I did all this right tests, okay, I have a diagnosis. No, you have to have an interpretation. Or even like QEG by itself, it's really not telling you what it is. It just shows the degree of degradation, the degree of, it's a widespread in every neurocognitive network, in different neural networks. So you need a specialist who would look at it not as a single test, but as everything. They look at it holistically, and the question for the physician is, please differentiate it from exposure to electromagnetic pulses. As long as it's on the menu, then you can hold your physician accountable. Why is it this diagnosis and not this?
Right.
Okay, let's move forward. Okay, this is a slide about the okay, what happened? Okay, are we disconnected? All right. Okay. Let's see what's happening. Hi, Melissa. Who dropped out? Me or you? Can't hear you yet.
Little bit.
Okay, you back?
Let me get the presentation back up. It just totally glitched.
Yeah, totally glitched when we went to that slide is about the involvement of the CIA into the NIH research on Havana Syndrome. So as soon as we opened it,
I know. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me get to the slide. I've got to bring it back. Okay. And there we go. I'm getting there.
I hope you find people finding.
There it is. There we go. It's loading. Okay. It's loading. Give it a second.
I have maybe like a couple of slides left.
Okay. Yeah. It's ironic, right? Yeah.
It's not the first time it's happening.
No, it just takes a little bit for a presentation to load, but it'll come back up. If maybe you want to go into the discussion of the slide while it loads, and then I'll get it back on the screen.
I'll start discussing the slide that we're going to present. So in 2019, there was a small study at the University of Pennsylvania that showed statistically significant difference between images, fMRI, DTI images in the Havana Syndrome cohort and the normal population, matched by gender and by age. But it was a small study, so here it is on top. JAMA, July 2019. There were 40 people in the affected group. Okay, and 40 or 41 in the control group, and there was statistically significant difference, and the people in the affected group were showing signs of brain injury, as in concussion, as in post-concussive syndrome. Then NIH took those people and expanded the study, and they wanted to show if this difference is really there by increasing the number of people in the affected group. So now affected group was 81 and control group is 40, which means probably the same people. And in that study, no statistically significant difference was found, but there was statistically significant difference within the group. Yeah, this is a little clumsy, but it did not confirm the 2019 study, because the people in the affected group, which went from 40 to 81, were coerced by the CIA, and there was reporting on CNN and Nora. I think I'm experiencing one of those attacks right now. At Miami Herald, and they reported that the NIH came out and said, well, we're discontinuing this research because we because people were unethically coerced into the study. So the CIA was sending people, specific people, who would
Mm.
dilute the affected group, and there wouldn't be any statistical significance. And they achieved it. And they achieved it. And after that, everybody who was involved in the original studies came out and said this is unacceptable. There's a coercion. They were trying to show specific. They were trying to erase this statistically significant difference. The narrative, if it was confirmed, the narrative would be that anomalous health incidents and Havana syndrome produce brain damage. And that's not the narrative the CIA is okay with. So they fought it. They meddled with the study, and the future NIH said, "Well, we're shutting down the future research." And CIA said, "Okay, fine." The study was not retracted, which it should be, but I filed a FOIA request with the NIH specifically asking, show me the IRB, Institutional Review Board documentation related to the discontinuation of the study. And they're working on this FOIA right now. Same went to the CIA, and they were just not responding at all. And then on the day that Radcliffe was sworn in, I on the same day I got a response, and they said, "Okay, we need more time," and they asked for like until October of 2025, which is unreasonable, but it's better than nothing. So we're
Right.
in a waiting period. We need to know more about why this study was bamboozled in this way. The CIA
Hmm.
meddled with the scientific research into clinical research into Havana syndrome. You know, that's the world we're living in when these things happen. Do you
Yeah.
remember this announcement, Melissa? It was
Yes,
an
I'm so glad that you brought it back. I'm glad that you brought it back up because I did not connect that recently when I was prepared for the interview. So thank you for
yeah,
mentioning that.
yeah. And the reason it slips through the cracks is because there is no retraction. If there was a retraction, we would be talking about it. But the research was discontinued without retraction. That's not kosher. So
Yes.
let's do to I think it's the final slide, perhaps. Okay, another thing. The DoD, Department of Defense, spent $750,000 and gave a grant to Wayne State University of Michigan, and it's a grant that they announced. We saw the announcement, and we know about this announcement because PETA came out and said, please don't experiment on animals, giving them Havana syndrome. So, but what this grant did is there was a grant and there was a sub grant, and 70% of this grant was spent on a study in primates, so monkeys. 30% was spent on a study in ferrets. And the most interesting part about it is that these studies utilize the source of electromagnetic energy that likely caused damage in diplomats. In black and white, this is the a screenshot of USA spending.gov. So there's no way and it said the grant was complete, the study was complete in 2023. Okay, I sent a FOIA request to the DoD, and the DoD said, even though there's a grant number, it's all trackable. They said,
Wow.
we don't have any responsive documents. On the other hand, the Wayne State University came back and said, yeah, we found the research report, but they're exempt from public release. So DoD lied
Yeah.
about it. This is something that journalists have to really wake up to, start asking the right questions. I hope that my relationship with CDC will allow me to ask for all these documents. But you see, if you're just a citizen and asking for what did you do with 750,000, they will tell you either non-responsive, which is a lie, or we're just not going to show you because it's national security. So if the U.S. government acknowledges that Havana syndrome takes place in civilians, then we can request this study because it affects health of general public, general American population, and the children. So those are the things that are kind of related, relevant to the diagnosis. All these things, the NIH study, the DoD grant, the intelligence community report, the Hoffer study, they all exist in this conglomerate of knowledge about Havana syndrome, and you need to know it better than your physician. I guarantee if you develop this knowledge, if you think you have Havana syndrome based on what's been reported, and you have the knowledge, the expert knowledge, which we give you in the diagnostic guidance, in this lecture, in this podcast. I went through it. I got diagnosed. I'm on disability due to Havana syndrome, and it's not going away. And now we have civilian registry. We are making steps in the right direction. And you would think that getting diagnosed and getting this data put together would be like a no-brainer, for the TI community, and yet something as non-controversial as a civilian registry simply doesn't get any support from other players in the TI community. I mean, we all know who the players are, and I'm shocked that something as non-controversial as diagnosing civilians with Havana syndrome does not get support by other people, other forces, other organizations.
Do you think it's because it's so close to that line that there has to be recognition that the government allowed these electromagnetic pulse frequencies to be targeted at civilians? Is it because it's so close to that? So we're saying that, but there was this back and forth on the Havana syndrome, shift blaming that, okay, it was from an enemy, and then it was not valid, then it is valid, that they are suffering these symptoms, and it is Havana syndrome as a result of pulsed electromagnetic frequencies. I think that just this alone with the DoD grant suggests that, oh yeah, we've got the information, but we don't want that to be public awareness, because then that means that we have to take responsibility for allowing these directed energy frequencies to be hit on civilians.
Correct. I think you're right. If this becomes public knowledge, and with that, there will be also public knowledge that the United States have these weapons that produce Havana syndrome, which is Professor Giordano, the neuroweapon expert, stated on the record. Yes, we do have weapons that produce Havana syndrome. So you connect the dots. A lot of people go to the intelligence community report, not the scientific one, but the just strictly intelligence, and they say, well, they don't say anything about civilians, and they don't say anything about U.S. having these weapons. You have to look at the scope of this report. So in the beginning of the report, and it's been updated recently, it says this is what we're looking for, and they're looking for damage in federal employees from foreign adversaries. This is the scope. This is the limitation. So if you start with a limited scope, you're not gonna get any answers outside of that scope. And I think it's on purpose. It's on purpose, and we're gonna change that. We're gonna change that. The medical diagnosis is something tangible, something that you can argue about in a scientific sense when we have statistics on our side. It's going to change, and I don't think the U.S. government knows how to deal with it, because they would be incriminating themselves.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that we can do is to help educate the doctors that the validity of these symptoms and the combination of symptoms are all pointing to what is published in these peer reviews, that civilians are experiencing these same combined symptoms. And by educating them, then that inadvertently that helps us as a community, because they can then go to their doctor and have them review this. And unless they're just not receptive to the proven, science that these things do exist and this is what it points to, then, I feel that most would be open. I don't think they've had exposure to it, and that's purposeful too.
And I think a lot of TIs can do the following: take a copy of the civilian registry report and take it and make an appointment with your representative or Congress person on the state level, on the federal level. Bring a physical report. It's only like 8 pages or 9 pages, something like that, maybe a little. And take a physical copy and bring and have this conversation with your elected official and unelected officials as well. So this is a vehicle. I view this registry as a vehicle for acknowledgement. A lot of people say we need justice, yes, but we will not get justice without the recognition. So this is a tangible step toward recognition.
And the DoD grant is a great opportunity for an independent journalist to latch on to this information of DoD stating that there's no responsive documents, yet the State University of Michigan confirms there are. They are just not, they're exempt from public release. So it's contradiction. I think it would be a great opportunity for someone to
Yeah,
take on.
you're reading my mind, Melissa. That was what was on my mind. And what's interesting, some people miss that according to this protocol, also described on the USA Spending.com, .gov, they are going to use a source of electromagnetic energy that likely caused damage to diplomats. So saying that we are not aware of any devices that would emit that kind of energy is just simply not true, because they were utilized in these studies, in these animal studies. So this is you're correct. This is an alternative. This is a journalistic paradise. Just this investigation alone could bring us a lot of publicity, which we so desperately need.
Absolutely. And you said that you thought this was the last. Oh, here, you had another slide.
Yeah. I have to mention this, that another way to get diagnosed if you are in the federal system, the Defense Health Agency Form 244 is supposed to educate you and walk you through the process of how to diagnose AHI. But this form is not available to the public. And what we also don't know, how this form has been validated. It's multiple pages, like 20 pages or something, of filling out symptoms and findings, and we just don't know how it came about. Like, you're reading half a paper and it's all explained, A, then B, and then C. This is a form, a very complicated form, which we just don't know what's behind it. How did you come up with this form? Did you
Mhm.
just, maybe the ferret study went into this, creating this form. And the weakness of this, it only supposed to identify the AHI. There's no form that would help you to identify NKBI, non-kinetic brain injury. And the
Mhm.
NKBI is inherently different from a traumatic brain injury and post-concussion syndrome. Like I said, the mechanical trauma versus the internal and targeted brain degradation to electromagnetic pulses. Two different mechanisms, two different presentations. I
Mhm.
think that's about it. Let's see. Yeah, just a short summary. Diagnosis of Havana Syndrome and its anomalous health incidents can be made decisively based on the four core characteristics, see previous slides, and findings, with vestibular tests being central to the diagnosis. Hoffer, 2019. And what we also need to remember is that diagnosis is based on a very specific homogeneous group, which is called the Havana cohort of the Havana syndrome. The Havana cohort is 25 people diagnosed using Hoffer criteria.
Mhm.
So when for example, Dr. Hoffa says, we see vestibular damage in the pattern to which is seen in patient with exposure to directed energy weapon, but it in a different pattern. He means that Havana syndrome, they had months or weeks of exposure, and then they came back, and there were no more attacks. Actually, in 6% of those people, the attacks were still experiencing attacks on U.S. soil. But in the majority, the attacks stopped, and that's the pattern of the Havana cohort. Now, you can be diagnosed using the same criteria, but your AHIs or neurostrikes are ongoing, and that's a
Mhm.
different pattern. So there's similarities with the Havana cohort,
Mhm.
and there are differences with the Havana cohort. If you have
Absolutely.
any questions whatsoever about diagnostic process, about how you can enter your diagnosis into civilian registry, here's the civilian registry email. It's a good idea to CC Target Justice, the real Target Justice, uh, on this communication, and subscribe to Target Justice Substack and to my Substack at lenbermd.substack.com. I think I exhausted the topic. What do you think, Melissa?
No, no, this is all good. I made lots of notes. I've been making notes the entire time that you've been speaking. This is so helpful and so educational to many. And I know that this is going to help so many people achieve the right direction toward the proper diagnosis from a physician. Knowing that the physician's diagnosis is the key. We can have tests all day long, but without that diagnosis, it is meaningless to us. I wanted to see if I could go through a few questions. Let me go through the chat here and take a look. I did see a few that I'd like to bring up for you.
Let me scroll to.
Okay, there was one. I know one of them was, do you know if Dr. Hoffer is taking on any civilian patients?
So that's a great question. You can find this information on my Substack. I specifically investigated this whole situation with Dr. Hoffer. He's patients have been rejected to see Dr. Hoffer, and I thought there's a problem with administrative process, but Dr. Hoffer actually said that this is the rule sort of he put in into the into practice, which actually, I still have um, hesitations about. You cannot refuse to see patients based on whether they are government employees, or it's like you are discriminating on based on the source of your income. This is not this is absolutely it's a discriminatory practice. But what happened after he published the paper, he said we had a slew of like people trying to get diagnosed, because the paper is published. You come in, you tell your symptom, and then he puts you through the set of vestibular tests. And 25 people came in right on the tail of publishing the paper, and they were fake. They were trying to fake it. These tests are objective. If you're trying to fake it, you're not going to succeed. It's going to be very they will know you're faking it. So that put some bad taste in Dr. Hoffer's mouth. And he also complains that people come with complaints about directed energy weapons. Well, Dr. Hoffer is not a directed energy weapon. And he also said they're also making all kinds of nonsensical claims. Well, that's his word. These claims are not nonsensical to me, but nevertheless, they're like non-related, even non-medical complaints. Like, for example, gang stalking. What gang stalking has to do with vestibular system? And he's a doctor. He's an otoneurologist. And so between those two, sort of asking for the wrong thing and sort of misbehaving, not being on your best behavior, he kind of implemented that rule. Yes, I will still see government employees, but not really people who are not federal employees or former federal employees. But if you call Dr. Hoffer's office and say, these are my symptoms, there's a balance issues I have, and I want to seek a consultation of Dr. Hoffer. And then when you speak to Dr. Hoffer, you describe it properly, he will absolutely catch the pattern. And he said, okay, well, since you're here, let's do the vestibular test. Sometimes it helps to have this conversation up front. So, for example, when I reached out to Dr. Hoffer's office, he said, let's have a telehealth appointment. And so we went through the telehealth appointment, and then he invited me and said, book a flight so you can spend a whole day we were going to do a whole vestibular panel. And that's what happened. And that's how I was diagnosed in June of 2020. So that's after 2018, after it was published, after 25 people came and tried to fake it. Then I was diagnosed. And after that, people started complaining that, we can't make a diagnosis. We can't make an appointment because we've been denied. We asked, are you a government employee? And they say no. And they said, well, unfortunately, Dr. Hoffer cannot see you. That's wrong. That's discrimination. But we also have to understand what Dr. Hoffer is going through. I mean, he is between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I'm sure that the government agencies just mistreat him, and all he wants to do is practice medicine, help
people.
People, help patients. If you watch the video of Dr. Hoffer, I posted after visiting him in August of 23. He was very, very positive about helping all people with vestibular issues, but it just got to the point that he had to start refusing patients. And I think it's wrong. And I think you can still see Dr. Hoffer if you simply put forward your complaints and don't ask for a specific diagnosis.
I think it would be wise, and depending on where you live, there may be somebody that does is a neurootologist,
Oh
but
yes,
then
yes, they're
but
in
then
every area.
yes, but then you kind of have to seek that out. It's not, I did a quick search the other day for, those in my area, but I need to keep digging at it and just make sure when you're calling and phoning, you know, making sure that they address balance issues and vertigo and those type things as more of in a specialty and a focus of area of focus within their practice, right? So I think those are kind of some key things that
Right,
you could look for while you're searching locally instead of having to rely on going outside of state. And, depending on where you live, it may not be an option,
right,
but you could always start closer to home, right?
right. Well, what I would suggest is you get your primary care physician involved, explain what you're trying to do, and ask for a reference. They know which doctors are outside of the box thinkers and which doctors are just you know um, 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 just just practice what they know. They never have any curiosity for a doc, for a physician, is important. My criterion for a physician, if I want to hire you as my physician, I need to know if you are able of changing your opinion. That's the criteria. That's the most important criterion for me. And I fired doctors for not being able to change their opinion. And just I some doctors, I just said thank you, shame on you, I'll never see you again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you do have to go through some that are just, I call them cookie cutters. They're not trying to think outside the box. They're just, got their prescription pad and just, you're in and out like cattle in 10 minutes.
I can tell you that the group of my physicians that take care of me, there's 7 doctors that were involved in maintaining and finessing the diagnosis, and only 2 of them, Dr. Hoff and Dr. and Professor Giordana, were actually experts. The 5 other doctors never heard about this ever before, and we got them on the right side of the diagnosis, and now I have a consensus of 7 doctors, including a psychiatrist.
Oh,
So
that's great.
that's how you build your medical team.
So when I was going through the comments, I think that we can, maybe take one more question, which is, and brain supplements. Do you recommend any certain particular brain supplements that kind of help with some of the symptoms of the vertigo or the brain fog? And, you know, um, for me, I have my own, but I was going to see which ones do you recommend are very supportive to the brain function.
Right. I can't make recommendations. I can tell you what I'm taking. I'm taking methylene blue for mitochondrial function, which is also a an aspect we need to talk about maybe in the future, about the
Mm-hmm.
oxygen saturation levels in people with synthetic biology in their blood.
Yes.
And I take an NAD plus, also mitochondrial support, and I'm taking um, ginkgo biloba for microcirculation. And then I take MK7, which is a form of vitamin K2, um, because you are exposed to electromagnetic pulses. It knocks out calcium out of your synapses, and
Yeah.
then you lose your hypercalcemia is actually one of the sign of anomalous health incidents. It's very non-specific, and doctors freak out about my elevated calcium, and they start checking parathyroid, and I say, don't worry about it. This is not, we checked it. Parathyroid is not involved. It's the calcium that gets knocked out when exposed to electromagnetic pulses, and you can lose that calcium. So what MK7 does, it takes the calcium and puts it back into the bone. So you don't have calcium lost. And I don't supplement with calcium, but this vitamin MK7, which is a form of vitamin K2, made from natto, which is a fermented Japanese food item.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so I take it on a regular basis. And as far as the symptoms, I've been on opioids and they don't work because it's a different kind of pain. What
Mm-hmm.
does work is the motion sickness over the counter products like a Dramamine or Meclizine, just over the counter. One is fast acting, another one is longer acting. I take a combination and I slightly exceed the recommended dose. Unfortunately, it produces dryness of the mouth, drowsiness, especially for Dramamine if you ever took it for motion sickness. But it does attenuate the feeling of buffeting, that vibrational pressure, extremely unpleasant. It does attenuate. It doesn't take care of it completely, but and it works, several hours. I'm trying not to take it all the time. Uh, just during the attack, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing you can do is affected. Try to disrupt it with massage guns set to different frequencies, so there's a heterodyne effect. It helps unless the intensity is extremely high, and it disrupts it. But the when you take them off, the entrainment begins again. So you have to be, and you can't be on this your entire day. You can also put it somewhere in the body, and it will help if the intensity is relatively low. And we all know that most targeted individuals experience low intensity, long duration attack. So it helps, even with a one massage gun. It helps, and it can disrupt the high intensity attacks as long as the intensity does not overwhelm you. And unfortunately, any kind of shielding just didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably because it's a scalar kind of attack, scalar kind of energy, which oscillates in the specific, it's a specific shape of the wave. So I mentioned Dramamine and Meclizine maybe once before, and I'm still figuring out the dose. Subjectively, it lowers the intensity of long duration
Mm-hmm.
neuroscience.
I found I have I did notice some relief with the massage gun, but I haven't tried the both at the same time. I do have a device that's like a red LED or red light therapy that's handheld. Like if I'm getting really hit on one side of the head, I feel like if I put that up on that side of the ear or right there at the vagus nerve behind the ear, it does help. It does help break it up. I have another red light, ultra violent light / red light too that I kind of, I also do detoxing. So I did that, mainly for detoxing. But for me, I, I, I find that the healthy fats for the brain, like MCT8 oil and olive oil and all the non-seed oils, that because I have a high inflammation response in my body with the high oxidative stress and the mitochondrial dysfunction and methylene imbalance. So I've got all of that going on. So I tried to cut out anything that was processed and then no sugars and no seed oils and anything that I can do to kind of support the cognition, because when and you definitely can understand you when you need to be able to get your thoughts together and in order to do the fight right, and to get out there and to be aware of and stay up to terms on the ever evolving technology that's out there, and to speak effectively, especially when we're trying to raise awareness. So I try to do anything I can, wellness wise, to support the brain and the nervous system that is taking a hit from all of this.
Definitely. This whole supplementation and what else we can do, there are a lot of things we can try. Unfortunately, we cannot know for sure because we cannot produce a controlled environment. So
Yeah.
these attacks are intentional. We don't know the exact shape of the attack. Like in the DoD grant, there was a source of energy and you can run a controlled study, but with our like daily existence, you don't know if the relief you're experiencing is from the intervention, or is it because they reduce the intensity of your targeting, of your attacks. There's just no way to have proper control, and that's the
Right.
problem with
Right.
a lot of this intervention. And this is, by the way, why they had to invent this term evidence-based medicine. You familiar with this term?
I have
And
heard.
it sounds, you have?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
But can you explain it to them too? So
right, but why would we have to invent evidence-based medicine? Because medicine should be based on the scientific method. This is how we
right.
know things. So in the scientific process, you collect evidence, then you formulate a hypothesis, and then you run a controlled experiment
Mm-hmm.
trying to falsify the hypothesis, not to
Right.
prove, not to
Right.
collect more evidence for it, but trying to nullify. And this, if we can't, then that hypothesis is remains plausible. This is how we know that the most plausible explanation for the anomalous health incidents is a directed or directable electromagnetic high power pulses, because nobody was able to falsify to show that something else and not the electromagnetic pulses cause this particular four characteristics and the findings.
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence-based medicine is like I try and it's worked. That's evidence. We just don't know what this evidence is for. So be aware of that. Uh, Medical doctors should be utilizing scientific method, but they don't, because they have the patient's interest first. So they're working with a specific patient, and so if this is working for you, then this is what I'm gonna prescribe you, and it's a trial and error. For
Mm-hmm.
to really know if it's working, you need to go through all the steps of the scientific process.
Right. It's just like trying to find that magic combination, but that combination might not work tomorrow. It may need a different combination because we never know what we're going to be dealt with the lottery of tax, right? So, but oh wow, this has just been so educational, and I did see that somebody wanted to know the Chosen Hero email address. It's chosen_heroes@proton.me. Again, Lynn, thank you so much. This has been such a great experience. Learned so much today. By the comments I'm seeing, there is many thanks and how informative this discussion has been. We definitely have got our tools that we can take away from this presentation in order to go and speak in a way to be received and heard from our doctors. So again, thank you so much. And I appreciate your time, and everyone have a blessed rest of the day and a beautiful week ahead. I continue to pray for each and every one of you and for the end of this injustice being done to us. God bless.